Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome once again to our weekly media briefing and public health update with Montgomery County Executive Marc Elrich. I'm Lorna Vigili, Hispanic Public Information Officer for Montgomery County Government, and joining us today is Dr. James Bridgers, Acting Health Officer, as well as Dr. Earl Stoddard, Assistant Chief Administrative Officer, Ms. Kimberly Townsend, Senior Administrator for Communicable Disease and Epidemiology for the Department of Health and Human Services. And today we have a special guest, Mr. Fernando Lemos, Executive Director and co-founder of Mi Casa. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Let's get started. Members of the media, remember to use the chat during the Q&A portion of this presentation. And with that, good afternoon to you, Mr. County Executive.
Thank you, and thank everybody for joining us for this week's media briefing, and I hope everybody has a happy Thanksgiving. Before we bring in Fernando and talk about affordable housing ownership, I wanted to express my sympathies to the victims of the horrible mass shooting that took place at Walmart in Chesapeake, Virginia last night, as well as Saturday night shootings at Club Q in Colorado Springs last week. In less than a week, we've experienced two senseless acts of violence that have forever changed the lives of people, families, and communities. And this makes more than 600 mass shootings in this country. The year's not even over yet. And yet our Supreme Court and the political right are absolutely making it easier to have more guns on the street. This is crazy. And they're thumbing their nose at what's going on in the real world is really disturbing because it's costing people their lives. I appreciate that our county council passed Bill 2122, which is weapons, firearms in and near places of public assembly. It was sponsored by Council President Gabe Albornoz. And this is a common sense legislation that makes our county safer, and I will be signing it into law. I think this legislation is what we need to do to help make our public spaces safer. And I'm committed to doing as much as we can to make our county as safe as possible. And legislation like the weapons, firearms in and near places of public assembly is a step in the right direction. Today, I'm glad to be joined by Fernando Lemos, Executive Director and co-founder of Mi Casa. And he's joining us to talk about their work in Tacoma Park with the Leland Tenants Association. The Leland Tenants Association recently signed an agreement that will enable them to keep their homes by purchasing the building rather than risk losing their homes due to escalating rent prices or potential sale of the property. Part of the financing comes from the county via the county's new Affordable Housing Opportunity Fund. Partners like Mi Casa, as well as Tacoma Park Mayor Kate Stewart, Delegate Lori Chartunian, were critical in making this deal come to fruition. The Affordable Housing Opportunity Fund, recreated, is designed to provide critical, readily available funding to acquire properties to preserve affordability and protect renters from displacement. In this case, the tenants bought their building to convert it into a co-op structure. I'm very pleased because expanding home ownership, which is key to creating wealth, is an important goal of my administration, an important part of a successful affordable housing strategy. We have not done a conversion like this in a very long time. And my hope is that we normalize this. We're looking to make changes in the tenant opportunity to purchase legislation to make it easier and a little bit less complicated. But I'm optimistic this can be an important tool in our arsenal when it comes to preserving and protecting affordable housing. And I hope to expand these efforts in the new year with help from the new council. So I'm going to turn it over to Fernando Lemos to introduce himself, his organization, and the work they did here in Tacoma Park. And I hope we can replicate it across the county. So Fernando, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Elrich, for the opportunity to come and do the brief presentation about Mi Casa. Mi Casa, we started 30 years ago with our goal to create a long-term affordable housing in the District of Columbia and in the surrounding area. We were successful and created approximately over 1,000 units in the district. 800 of that units were co-ops. And the reason was exactly what happened with Avenue, Leland Tenants Association. There are 15 units in total, 33 one-bedroom and 12 two-bedrooms. Without the participation and the support of the community, 12 families with very low income who cannot afford to go to a bank to get a mortgage will be able to acquire the unit and have control of their residency. That was one of the things that motivated the tenants and to say, okay, this is provide us with permanent long-term affordable housing. And some of the tenants at that moment accept to increase a little bit the rent to subsidize tenants inside the building who cannot afford. So that is key component in the process of organizing the non-equity co-ops that the tenant choose to. An important thing also is that they were very conscious that and very determined that they need a subsidy in order to achieve the goal. And I think it's one of the things that Montgomery County was very effective and provide the permanent gap financing that the tenants was needed to maintain the affordability in the long term. As well, I would say there was some participation from the city of Tacoma, the state, Maryland state, as well Purple Line groups. I think that was in things that put together and maintain the affordability. As we progressing with the tenants purchase TALPA, and we have to be conscious and related to understand that the gap financing is a key component and subsidize the tenants and maintain the affordability for over 40 years of extension time. For those families that we work with, it is very important to maintain where they live, because that provides not only a decent housing that they have control and they manage it themselves, also provide a stable family in the area that they grow. They have access to the school, they have access to the churches, they are part of that community in the long term, and this is prevent displacement. Also, I think it's this is as the time go, Tacoma Park in Montgomery County commitment to provide long-term affordability and decent affordable housing will be something that we and the history of the community. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to. I think it's you know, if we have any question, I can answer any question.
Thank you, Mr. Lemus and Mr. County Executive. Members of the media, we're going to open it up right now, Q&A, questions regarding this topic for Mr. Lemus and or the County Executive. And I see that Steve Bonell, Bethesda Beat, has some questions. Good afternoon, Steve.
Afternoon. This first one's for Fernando. One of the things you mentioned, sir, is that in order for at least this specific example to work, that some tenants need to, you know, pay a little bit more in rent than others that don't have the level of income. I just want to start out, what does that conversation go like? I'm sure that a lot of people understand that this is for the greater good, but I just kind of want you to expand on that aspect of this, I guess, if you can.
I think that is the commitment that each group make a difference. They are neighbors. They share the building for many, many years. They know the situation financially and economically. And as a part of the organizing, when they start to make the decision what they want to do with the building, if they want to keep it as a permanent housing for them in whatever form they choose, they have to make that kind of decisions. to establish the price in the community. And in this case, when we have people with different income, they choose to make the decision. They are the ones that have control, and they are the ones that need to make any decision about the building future. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, yes, sir. Either you or the county executive can field this one. Just what was it like dealing with the landlord in this process? And do you think that, broadly speaking, that landlords, just from your seat, will, see this as a viable option, I guess, for other potential developments in older buildings?
The interesting things, it's TOPA, the tenants purchase opportunity right is given the right of the tenants to match any offer for purchase of the building. So the landlord has the obligations to give the option to the tenants to purchase the building or to match any offer. And that's the way when the tenants organize themselves with the system of MICASA and other organizations to decide what they want to do. Most of our experience is when the tenant has the opportunity, most of the tenants decide to go to purchase a building, to keep the ownership in one way or another. And in majority of the cases, and with low-income residents, they decided to go to co-op. And that's one of the things that is important, because a lot of the tenants that we work with in the community are not bankable. They cannot go to a bank to get a private loans.
And this last one, perhaps for the county executive, are there any areas of the county that you foresee in the immediate future, or even just the future, where this can be replicated, hopefully?
I mean, it can be replicated any place, truthfully, where tenants are interested in doing this. We have a right of first refusal law that doesn't require any acquiescence by a landlord. Tenants have the right to match the sales price, and assuming they can put together financing, which frankly has always been one of the challenges, is putting together the financing for these projects. But if they can put together the financing and the timeframes that are allowed, they have the opportunity to do this. Unfortunately, for years, the county was like no help in this area. I mean, we've had tenant groups approach the county before and not receive any assistance in terms of purchasing their units. We're aiming to change that, and we're glad we had the opportunity here. Hopefully other tenants will read about this, and when they're notified that their buildings are up for sale, hopefully they'll reach out and ask for assistance. One thing I know we have to do is be able to provide assistance early on in the process so that tenants understand how this can be done. It's not something you can do at the last minute. And I do think we will be able to be more aggressive in assisting tenants as we go forward.
How strong of a tool in the whole toolbox of the affordable housing issue do you think that this is, if that makes sense?
Well, it's a different tool because it gets us to ownership. I mean, if we can intervene, and we work with nonprofits who buy buildings, and the nonprofits typically keep maintaining them as rental property. I've had conversations with people in the nonprofit community. I've asked them to look more at creating opportunities to own rather than simply changing the landlord from the for-profit landlord to the nonprofit. I think everybody understands that ownership is the key to wealth, and particularly generational wealth. And so I'll continue to work with the nonprofits we work with to think more along the lines of where are the opportunities to help tenants purchase their buildings. So I anticipate we're going to have the opportunity. I certainly have the will to do this. And I think in the long run, ownership is better than renting for people, flat out. I mean, the ability to build wealth, to be able to tap into your equity if you want to send a kid to college or help your kid with a down payment on a house. All those things aren't available to renters, but they're available to homeowners. And so I think it's important that we look at this and realize this is more than just owning the building, but it can be transformational in terms of your economic prospects.
I apologize, but since the county helps out with some of the financing, are the tenants in the kind of in main charge once they own the building with upkeep or whatnot, or is the county obligated or have any role in that, if that makes sense, and just upkeep of a building?
I don't quite understand your question. Does the county have a role in updating the building?
The overall maintenance of a building once it's under the ownership of tenants.
So we don't have a role in overall in maintaining the building. That's becomes a responsibility of the tenants. You know, when they pay rent, they're paying for a landlord who's supposed to maintain the building. When you own the building, part of what you need to pay has to, you know, are co-op fees that go to maintaining the building. I think the role of the county, along with groups like Mikasa, is to make sure that the tenants make the repairs when they take over the building, that if they need windows, if they need heating systems, that those things are baked into the plan for ownership so that the tenants don't arrive at a place a couple of years down the road where all of a sudden they're facing, say, replacing the heating system, and they don't have the reserves, they haven't put money away to be able to do that, and then they encounter, you know, real challenges in being able to make that maintenance. So we have to set these things up in a way that they're going to be sustainable. And that's, like I said, it's our job to help with that. And it's also the job of whoever their consultant is in going into this process.
Yeah, when the county provide the financing, the gap financing, and they have a covenant on the documentation, on the loan agreement, and the condition, and one of the main conditions that they do is that the co-op will maintain affordability of the unit and the building itself. That's one of the big requirements that in any things you keep maintaining and added new affordable units in the county as the process going.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Steve. I think Ryan WTOP also has a quick question for you, Mr. Lemos. Okay, good afternoon.
I do. Thank you very much. And Steve got to part of my question on the maintenance issue, because I know that's where big bucks can get involved. But Mr. Lemos, is there a type or a size of building that this is best done in? I don't know if, you know, an extremely large complex can be successful with this. Is there an ideal, or if you will, target, you know, audience for this sort of thing?
We work with all the tenants that wants to exercise. Most of the buildings that we work with are 25 units and above, and you know, 40 and 50, all depend on the area. But yes, as the building is middle size and are probably much more effective than 300 units, you know. But yes, most of the buildings that we are experienced working and they were very successful are in the area of 45, 50, 60 unit building.
Got it. And is age a consideration? Again, as we're talking about things like everything from HVAC to just, you know, interior structure, et cetera?
That is part of the development plans that the building, the tenants and the co-op membership develop right after purchases. That included in the development plan. So we assist the tenants and provide technical assistance, not only in purchase the tenant, the buildings, you know, also in develop the building and do the necessary repair and upgrade. But a lot of the tenants, the buildings that we work with need a substantial renovation, not only the windows or not only the doors, also the mechanical system, the electrical system, and plumbing. Most of the buildings are aging and they need it, you know, repair, exterior repair, roof, and everything. And the tenants and all the members understand exactly what is going to happen, and that take it in process.
Got it. So it's baked into the plan. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Kate. Members of the media, any more questions regarding this topic for the county executive and or Mr. Lemos? Going once? Twice? No more questions? Thank you, Mr. Fernando Lemos, for joining us this afternoon. Have a great day and a wonderful holiday. We'll see you soon.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have enjoyed the holidays.
Thank you. Mr. County Executive, a public health update and other topics.
So thank you again, Fernanda.
Thank you.
Before we go into our weekly health updates, there are a couple of issues I want to address. I want to thank our Department of Environmental Protection for their Gift Outside the Box campaign. And we had a press conference yesterday at the transfer station. This is where all our solid waste comes to before it heads to a final destination. And I appreciate the media for helping us get the word out about the importance of sustainable gift giving this holiday. We're encouraging everyone to think of gifts that don't need to be wrapped, like experiences, including classes, music lessons, or my favorite thing, concert tickets. Sometimes the most appreciated gifts are donations to local charities in the name of a family member or friend. My kids often ask me to do that. And we need everyone to please remember to reduce, reuse, recycle when it comes to gifting. Plenty of people are going to go shopping at stores and online this week as well. And we are encouraging people to buy locally. This is very important to our environment, but it's really important for our local small businesses. They make up about, you log about 26% fewer miles going to the local businesses. And locally owned businesses make more local purchases, requiring less transportation and reducing pollution. Buying local during the holiday season is critical to our local economy. 95% of businesses in the county have 50 or fewer employees. So spending locally is important. When you spend locally, 68 cents out of every dollar stays in our community. That's about 1.6 times more capital staying in the local community as compared to a chain business. And 6 times more capital staying here in Montgomery County than when it's spent online. I'll be out this weekend visiting several of our small businesses for a Small Business Saturday. I look forward to talking with them and hearing their hopes and concerns for this coming holiday shopping season. On the I-95 I-270 project, MDOT has delayed it. As this is one of the busiest travel times of the year, it's good to have a reminder how important it is for us to improve the I-270 corridor and the health of the American Legion Bridge. But there are different ways of improving it, and some are more effective and some are more cost effective than others. And as I said before, I appreciate the governor's willingness to address the problems, but we have to do it in the right way. So I'm pleased that MDOT has applied for federal funds to address the American Legion Bridge. I can't remember how long I've been talking about why haven't we gone to the federal government. And I'm really happy to see that they're actually doing that now. And I want to thank the community members and environmental advocates who've worked so hard for a better deal here. As I said repeatedly, I believe this project is currently designed is seriously flawed and overly expensive. It has been unnecessarily blown up, basically to maximize the cost of the project, which maximizes the return to the person or the company that was going to be the owner operator, not necessarily to achieve the most effective and efficient system for moving cars in the county. And the state never fully explored the option of the state building the project outright that might reduce costs and can make it possible to not do this as a toll lane project. I remind people that the Woodrow Wilson Bridge, which was stunningly expensive to replace, did so with about half the funding coming from the federal government. There are no tolls on the bridge and there's no tolls on the road system to pay for it. And I would hope that we can do the same thing with this bridge, produce it in a way that doesn't require it to be tolled or have people paying tolls on the road to pay for it. The toll lane project, frankly, is going to segregate the beneficiaries between those who can afford high tolls and those who can't. And as we see, even in Virginia today with their toll lanes, traffic on the non-toll lanes can be very problematic. The studies that were done for the state are not do not paint the rosy picture of what happens to the people who are not able to use the toll lanes. And if, you know, in my perfect world, and we don't know if we're going to see the perfect world, but in the perfect world, we'd manage this with our resources over a period of time of paying for it over, you know, 20, 30 years, and not have to get into making this a toll project. I've also stated that a new generation of leadership should vote on this project. And so this delay means that the decisions are going to be made by Governor-elect Moore and Comptroller-elect Learman and Treasurer Davis, who will have the opportunity to provide their own critical evaluation. I look forward to working with them in partnership to provide traffic relief while also protecting our environment and our communities, and frankly, also our pocketbooks. I want to give an update on the condo complex fire explosion that occurred earlier this week. I continue to keep the families in Gaithersburg displaced by last week's fire and building collapse in my thoughts. And, you know, we're working hard along with our nonprofit partners to make sure we can support these families. About 50 people have either lost their homes or cannot return to their homes yet because of the explosion, including 10 children. And I can only imagine how difficult it is for these families to deal with losing everything. As you can see from the picture, the devastation in these units was pretty complete. And the people in those collapsed sections have lost everything. And so Montgomery Housing Partnership, much as they did in the last fire we had, to set up a fund to help solicit donations for these displaced families. And so far, they've already raised $100,000. And these residents need every dollar we can get them to get them back on their feet. I also want to express my appreciation for our fire and rescue services, the police department, emergency management, and health and human service departments, as well as the Red Cross in the city of Gaithersburg. The police investigation determined that this disaster was a result of a suicide, and police investigators report that there's no indication that the individual who killed himself meant to harm others. So I would want to add here that there was speculation about this being the third gas or potentially gas involved explosion, that somehow there was a chain of events or, you know, circumstances that were concerning that we had 3 gas explosions in the county. I want to remind people that the first gas explosion on the Flower Branch Apartments was triggered by a faulty regulator, and they are in the process of replacing the regulators. The second explosion was triggered when a service person working on pipes cut a gas pipe in half, which led to the accumulation of gas and explosion. It had nothing to do with any mechanical failure in the system. And the third explosion was caused by a suicide attempt involving an explosion. And when you see papers rushing out to assert in headlines that there's an alarming trend in the county of gas explosions, it'd probably be a good idea to wait until you know facts about all of these explosions to see if there's a common thread or a thread that this requires further investigation rather than alarming people, because I guarantee you that in the complex where this happened, everybody's first thought turns to, is this another failure of a gas system, and are all of us in danger? And fortunately, we were able very quickly to tell people this had nothing to do with the gas system in the building and everything to do with the suicide attempt. But I think everybody has to be cognizant of how they frame things and not create alarm where there's no cause for alarm. If there's a connected problem, we are going to deal with it. The WSSC is still going through the regulatory process to deal with the issues that were raised by the last fire. But I would just urge caution before people decide there's a link, causality, and something alarming to be worried about. This tragedy is a reminder of how important it is also to look for signs of mental health distress. I encourage anyone who's thinking about suicide or aware of someone who needs help to please call 988. This is the new National Suicide Prevention Hotline. Montgomery County also operates a 24-hour crisis center that you can reach by contacting 240-777-4000. The holiday season is often a difficult time for those who are isolated and alone or depressed. It is imperative that we reach out and attempt to get help to those who are in need. So I hope that whether it's you or someone you love or just someone you know that you think is having a hard time coping, please help them get to those who can provide them assistance. We have the ability to help people, and we hope people will take avail of our availability here. In terms of the weekly health updates, I'm very concerned about the data we're seeing regarding the current tridemic. And we're calling it a tridemic because what we're experiencing is 3 overlapping viruses that are infecting people. We have COVID. We've all know a lot about COVID over the last couple of years. We have the flu. We've had a lot of experience with the flu historically, though not so much the last 2 years because everybody was masked. And then RSV, which most of us haven't heard about, but has been around for a while. And this, the combination of 3 is creating a perfect storm. So for the last 2 years, our Thanksgiving gatherings have been smaller and closer to home. But this year, the AAA is predicting that holiday travel is going to be close to pre-pandemic levels, with nearly 55 million Americans traveling over the extended weekend. Montgomery County continues to be low at the community level. According to the CDC, our case rates per 100,000 residents are hovering in the 80s, while our hospitalization rate from COVID is little over 7 per 100,000 residents. Despite this good news, we're still concerned about our holiday gatherings and a winter surge of cases as we witnessed during the past 2 years. And our best defense against the surge is to make sure you've got your bivalent booster. If you feel sick, please stay home and contact your primary care physician if needed. The bivalent booster, and Dr. Fauci's talked about that this week, is more effective than the previous boosters, which is good news. The main benefit of these boosters is keeping people from getting seriously ill and winding up in a hospital, and worst of all, winding up not alive. So we have the tools to keep people safe, and we hope people will avail themselves of that. Recent media reports noted the success of the new bivalent booster being significantly higher than the original vaccine and boosters. They had this is a quote here, a 15-fold increase in Omicron BA4, BA5 antibody levels from pre-booster levels. These new bivalent boosters have a 93% efficacy rate as compared to 85% efficacy of the original vaccine and booster. Unfortunately, only 23.1% of our eligible population has received the bivalent booster, and we need to increase that number. Again, there's no reason to get sick from COVID or die from COVID if you get boosted. So please get yourself boosted. This flu season is heading into being one of the most severe we've had in more than a decade. As you can see from the graphic of flu associated with hospitalization in the state, we're at a level 200 times higher than this time last year, at this time of the year, 200 times higher at this time of year than we've been for the last 3 years. And getting the flu shot is the best way to protect from severe illness and death. But vaccine uptake has also been sluggish on the flu shots. So this is complicating our overall health situation. And then we have the RSV virus, which is during the past week, we have 150 pediatric and 42 adult cases hospitalized with RSV in the state. That's more than 3 times higher than this time last year. Overwhelming majority of these cases are among the most vulnerable populations. That would be children under 2 and people over 65. So as Holy Cross's Ann Burke noted in the Washington Post article over the weekend about the tridemic, the hospitals continue to be under unrelenting distress. She was quoted with the best advice we need to pass along: wash your hands and get your vaccine and try to help us out. The hospitals are really concerned about capacity levels, and we have 3 things out there now that can put people in the hospital. So please do everything you can to avoid becoming one of those people. Finally, today is known as Blackout Wednesday or Drinksgiving, and when many go out and binge drink before the Thanksgiving holiday. According to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, from 2015 to 2019, 135 drivers involved in fatal crashes nationally on Thanksgiving Eve were alcohol impaired. I want to thank our ABS for working with restaurants and bars and distributing beverage coasters that feature a QR code directly sending patients to an online list of alternative rides to get home safely when drinking, imprinted with the phrase, "Had one too many? Scan for a ride." The coasters are being distributed free of charge to bars and restaurants, and the goal is to provide an easily accessible list of alternative rides to patrons to deter them from driving after they've been drinking. Montgomery County Police will have an increased presence on the roads this evening and will be looking for intoxicated drivers. I hope everyone has a great time catching up with family and friends. I plan on doing some of this, but please plan ahead, take a taxi or rideshare service, and don't get behind the wheel whether you're drunk or buzzed. And I'm now going to turn this over to Dr. Bridgers, Kim Townsend, and Dr. Stoddard for their updates. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. County Executive. I don't have any additional updates before Ms. Townsend gets into our metrics for our pulse report. You've laid out a very great public health message. Wash your hands frequently, get your bivalent booster, get a flu shot. If you're eligible and you can get one, you can get one at the same time you can get your COVID bivalent booster. Stay home if you're sick, and consult your primary care physician. So you laid it out nicely, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Townsend now.
Thank you, Dr. Bridgers. So just briefly, I'm going to go through our weekly pulse report. As you can see here, we continue to see different variants of BA.5. We see an increase of the BQ and the BF variants in our community. The good news is, as mentioned previously, the new bivalent boosters can help protect against severe illness related to these variants. So please, just as a reminder, please come out and get your boosters. You can see here, as mentioned before, the Montgomery County's community level is still at a low level. At the time this PowerPoint or Pulse report was created, the level was at 85.09. Today's case count is 84.21. Here is the information that we continue to monitor about the occupancy of our ICU and acute care beds, as well as our alternate care sites. You can see here, we have 101 hospitalized patients in our hospitals. That's up 7 from our previous week. And we have seen a slight decrease. We have 40 patients at our alternate care sites, which is a decrease of 4. A main goal we have is to minimize or decrease severe illness related to COVID-19. We continue to see some deaths in our state and in our county. Within the last month or so, we've seen 1 additional death in our county, and there's been a slight decrease in the state of Maryland. Just a reminder here that hospitalization rates as well as death rates are higher among those that are not vaccinated against COVID-19. So just again, a reminder of the importance of receiving boosters for all that are eligible. In terms of COVID-19 vaccination, as per the CDC, where we have greater than 95% total population has received at least 1 dose, with 92% with at least 2 doses and 60% fully vaccinated. And we also have, for our population of 65 and older, 82% are fully vaccinated and 62% have received a second booster. Again, as our county executive had mentioned, we have seen some county residents coming out for bivalent boosters. For those that are aged 50 and over, 32.5% have received a bivalent vaccine since it became available in early September. We continue to monitor gaps in terms of vaccine rates by race. You can see that some populations are African American and Hispanic populations are having a little bit of lower rates in terms of first and additional doses. We continue to outreach and work with our community partners by providing vaccines throughout the community. Looking at influenza and respiratory diseases, the CDC estimates that there have been at least 4.4 million illnesses, 3,800 hospitalizations, and 38,000 hospitalizations and 2,100 deaths from flu. The cumulative hospitalization rate currently sits at 8.1, and you can see that our region is at a very high rate of influenza-like illness activity. So nationally, of course, getting the flu shot is the best way to protect from severe illness and death. As mentioned by Mr. County Executive, uptake has been sluggish in comparison with previous flu seasons. Also like to mention that if you are eligible to receive an antiviral, they should be started as early as possible for optimal effectiveness. You can see here for U.S. influenza that in comparison to the previous seasons, the yellow line here at the top shows that we are seeing a higher level of cases earlier in the season, and those cases tend to be predominantly between ages 0 and 24. Again, compared to previous years across the U.S. in terms of cases of influenza, you can see that we have a higher level of cases earlier in the season. And this very similar is what we're seeing in the United States. In the state of Maryland, we're seeing more cases earlier in the season as compared to previous years. And most of the cases are between the ages of 5 and 24. The same in hospitalizations as reviewed earlier. In terms of influenza vaccination, 23% of our Marylanders have been vaccinated against flu. For our county, we have vaccinated 28.8% thus far this season. Just looking at the big picture, on your left, you'll see a graph of emergency department visits. It continues to rise as time, especially over the past few weeks. This is impacting emergency departments in that it has increased wait times and increased volume. On your right, you can see in terms of visits for febrile respiratory illnesses, there's a marked increase among those aged 0 to 4 and 5 to 17. However, in the lower sections, you can see it's also starting to increase other age groups. This is just a little bit more about RSV. You can see there's consistent increase in cases over the past few weeks. And the orange line here indicates the amount of positive tests for RSV. As we discussed previously, RSV for those greatest at risk would be premature infants, young infants, children younger than 2, and older adults, as well as individuals that have compromised immune systems. So again, if you're concerned that you're at risk, if you have persistent symptoms, please notify your healthcare provider. And just briefly, an update on MPX. We continue to see new cases, although it has slowed. We've seen just a few cases in our county over the past few weeks. We continue to offer vaccine to those that are at highest risk. We have plenty of vaccine. We have used just about all of the vaccine doses we have on hand, and we'll be placing an additional order to the state sometime next week. So that concludes the pulse report review, and I will turn it over to Dr. Stoddard.
I have no opening comments this week. I think we can move right on to questions.
All right, thank you, Dr. Stoddard. Thank you, Ms. Townsend and Dr. Bridgers. Members of the media, this is the time for Q&A. Please use a chat, and I do not see any requests for questions, so we'll give it a second or two. Anybody has questions for the officials? Kate Ryan, do you have questions?
I do. Thank you very much.
Go
I
ahead.
just wanted to touch on with Dr. Stoddard and County Executive Elrich again, going back to the latest apartment explosion and displacement of folks. $100,000 raised right now. Again, total families who are still currently not either, who have not yet found alternative housing. Do we know that? And again, best place, I know that people do want to help. Best place that they can direct their efforts. And I understand, a lot of people think donating goods, but usually financial is the most efficient use. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Mark, you can start, or I'm happy to start either way.
Yeah, so Montgomery Housing Partnership is, restarted a new fund for this, and the address for it is mhpartners.com. .org, and then it's /
Gaithersburg Fire.
Gaithersburg Fire. So they've got a fund started there, and they're collecting money. I guess the Red Cross is no doubt still taking donations as well. So those are the two most likely places, I think, at least on the top of my head.
Yeah, what I would say generally is in these incidents, we have a really robust series of nonprofit partners who are involved. The Up County Hub, Grace Rivera Oven, who operates the Up County Hub, was on scene on Wednesday and has been providing support in terms of formula and food and other resources. We certainly, in these incidents, the most flexible thing, the thing that has the longest shelf life, is cash. These residents will have to replace not just food and formula and diapers and clothing, but they're going to have to replace documents, car keys. I know there's been donations by some of these businesses to do car keys. I saw that online as well. But, cash is king in these situations. It is the most flexible. It's not that, these people are not going to make a profit out of this incident. I can promise you that, but they will be able to, they'll be able to provide their current needs, and as needs emerge that weren't expected, the cash gives the flexibility to do the rest of them. As a reminder, Montgomery Housing Partnership takes $0. I know often when donations are made, a percentage goes to administrative fees. They have waived all of that. 100% of what goes into that fund is paid out to residents. They do it in several installments as new funds are raised. But it's done via a committee that partners with several nonprofits and the county to identify who's got different levels of need based on were they in the 9 apartments that were or condos that were completely destroyed versus the other 15 that were less destroyed. And so they try and stratify the allocations based on the level of impact and what was or wasn't able to be recovered from the housing. So obviously that's a really important part of our ongoing support.
Got that. And in terms of profiles of these families, are we talking about mostly older adults or young families? And again, in terms of the types of needs, and our area schools working to help some of these families who might have been affected? I can't imagine a little kid having to go back to school after something like this, the disruption, et cetera?
Yeah, there's been a great interface with the school system. In fact, I know I having been on scene on Wednesday, Stephanie Izzard and several from the MCPS security team were there working on both the initial plan to move students off site to get them out, get them home after the day was over. But the ongoing support that MCPS provides is exceptional. They're part of the system that we do in terms of supporting families, both with their physical needs, but also their mental health and spiritual health needs as well. And so there is ongoing work with MCPS around these students. We've literally flagged them the day of so they can begin to provide those levels of support. It is incredibly jarring for these families in terms of the disruption to their life at a very vulnerable time. Obviously, Thanksgiving being tomorrow and the end of year holidays, whether it be Christmas, Hanukkah, or any of the other Kwanzaa or any of the other celebrations are coming at the end of the year. We know that people, this is going to be very disruptive for families in that way. The majority of people, I think, from the earliest records I have are actually, single or double occupancy. There are a few larger family units in some of the units, and several of the children are indeed younger. I think it was 50 total people in 24 units. So that's about two people, slightly over 2 people per unit, which is a little bit lower than one might expect. We usually use about 2.5 in our equation. So more 1-2 person units than otherwise, and really working class individuals. I think that's reflected in partly why we didn't see as many we didn't see more loss of life in this incident was because a lot of people had already got up, got out, gotten kids out to school and class and had gone off to work because that, it's a very blue collar work community in that area.
Got it. Thanks a lot. Anything else that we should keep in mind again for folks who want to help out?
No, I think the fund is the place, right place to do it. American Red Cross is very helpful as well. And, we have community organizations active in disasters that includes Wider Circle and several of the other nonprofits, Interfaith Works, who are very active in providing response, and certainly donating to any of those organizations can be helpful during the holiday season for helping not just the residents of the Gaithersburg fire, but residents across the county who need assistance.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Kate, and members of the media. The link for the donations is right here on this chat. Katie Lusso with WUSA 9 has questions. I see you posted them. Do you want to ask them or do you want me to read them, Katie?
Awesome. So I spoke to a woman today who lives next to the explosion site, directly next to it. And she says she still has been smelling gas at times. She was allowed to return to her home, but is concerned about safety and wants to know what's being done to ensure the safety of her and the other families who still live there, but aren't, their apartments weren't destroyed.
Yeah, so on the Wednesday of the explosion, the fire rescue team went with monitors from unit to unit across the entire complex and made sure to screen each of those before reoccupancy for gas. I will reiterate what the fire chief said many times, however. If you smell gas, leave the building that you're in, call 911 directly. They will come out with meters and assess whether there's any gas leak or not. So they have had other gas leaks reported in that complex in certainly even in the days since the explosion, and in I think all cases they've been appliance level issues. So a gas stove may have a leak at the stove level, not in the overall distribution system of the community. Much of the gas infrastructure in this complex has actually been moved outdoors, as is consistently best practices. So the regulators are often not in the buildings any longer, and they don't use the same mercury regulators that were problematic for the Arliss Street explosion. They're a spring mechanism regulators in this complex, which is obviously much safer. So if you smell gas, get out, call 911. They'll come out with meters and check. But obviously they already did check for all of the other units as well.
Sure. And then my second question was, when will the families start receiving the money that's been donated? When can they expect that, as you know, tomorrow is Thanksgiving? And
Yep, the first checks went out last night. There was a resource event at the Board Park Recreation Center from 4 to 6 p.m. last night. The first checks went out the door there. I believe I want to say $40,000 was distributed according to Montgomery Housing Partnership last night, and the next chunk will go out next week. Obviously, it's just a matter of making sure that they're being intentional about the awards that were given, just to make sure that they can, we will know the total size of the fund, we'll know the needs. There are some folks who have medical bills and other things that they're trying to still assess. And so the first checks did go out last night.
Thank you, Katie. Members of the media, any more questions before we toss it over to Kate Ryan again? She has another question. All right, Kate, the floor is yours. You have a follow-up question. Kate Ryan?
Yep, sorry. The discussion on the alcohol enforcement at this time of year, we all know that's very important. One of the questions I had is in terms of upcoming legislative session. Will Mr. Elrich, do you have any opinion on getting something that MAD has been pushing for some time, which is the devices that could be in cars as a matter of course that could do the alcohol screening? I'm blanking. Oh, the ignition devices.
Yes.
Is that something you would support? And do you know whether or not lawmakers are going for that again this year?
I don't know if they're going for it, but I would definitely support it. I think it's important, and it's hard to believe that, given we have the technology to do this, that we have to struggle to do it. We ought to make it as difficult as possible for somebody who's intoxicated to drive a car. So in my mind, this is something we absolutely ought to be doing.
Thank you very much.
And I think they need, frankly, stricter penalties. If you've got a drunk driving thing one time, you shouldn't, if you get a second one, you should not be able to get a probation before judgment or anything. You should be sanctioned, and you should lose your ability to drive a car for a while. It's if there people have systems where you'd be allowed to drive your car during certain times of day to go to work, because you don't want to make a penalty like this something that prevents somebody from having a job. That would, I think, be really complicating, but we need to figure out a way to take people off the street. Period.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Members of the media, any more questions?
One other piece for Kate's question. So that we actually have a work group that's been working between alcohol beverage services and Montgomery County Police Department and Montgomery County Department of Transportation and the County Executive's Office around an anti-impaired driving strategy. And so they're actually just completing their recommendations, and we're going to sit down and review them with the county executive, but there is ongoing work on the impaired driving front. And I would also add, and this isn't directly related to this, but we are paying very close attention to the state legislature as they consider the impaired driving related to marijuana legalization that obviously just was enacted. So we're going to have, there's going to be a lot in the impaired driving space that the county is interested in both partnering with the state on and will be responsible for ultimately enforcing.
Got it. Thank you very much. When do you expect that to be out, the full report?
I've seen just the preliminary draft findings. They have to codify it into a report. My guess is over the next, I would say, 60 days.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Kate. Any more questions, members of the media? Going once, going twice. I guess we're done for today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and stay safe. Have a wonderful holiday celebration, and thank you. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.